kill that, and it should work. Let's see what happens. No, don't save it. It didn't work, so don't save it. I sent the. Did the link go through? Are you in the other one? Oh, you're me, so you probably got transferred over, right? Well, apparently it did. People are coming over. So, okay. Hi. This is my life now. I am so sorry, folks. I don't know what to tell you. Every time I mention this study, it's literally the exact moment I mention this study, I get crushed. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what the cause is, but I do want to tell you what the study says. I think it's utterly essential. We'll let the people to come back through. My apologies, folks. I don't know what is happening here, but I have perfect connection. The moment I mention this study, twice now it's gone off. If it goes off a third time, I'm just going to give up. But I really want you to know it. If you didn't have a chance to listen to the podcast, here's what the study says before I read it. Because, you know what? It doesn't want to let me read it. I'm just going to tell you this. Well, I have to tell you the conclusion of it. Here's what I'm learning. That there is evidence, substantial evidence now that COVID works as a neurological factor. That what it does is, in addition to all the nastiness it does in the lungs that we talked about and in the blood vessels, that it's also through the olfactory nerves and the conjunctive nerves. It's coming in through these areas, and what it's doing is how should I put it? It's interfering with the function, it appears, of the autonomic nervous system. That's to say, the stuff your body does that you're not thinking about. You know, you don't tell your heart to beat. You're not thinking, I want my heart to beat faster. And you can override your breathing, but we naturally breathe on our own. And it's a good thing we don't, because otherwise we spend all of our time doing it. Yet there was this one great example in the study, and I'm just going to read this one line because I think it's worth sharing with you. Where the hell to go? Let's find it here. Sorry if I'm getting a little frustrated, by the way, but I think this is just like this perfect line that really made it clear to me. So, and this is the key paragraph. In light of the high similarity between SARS and COVID, it is quite likely that the potential neuroinvasion of COVID plays an important role in the acute respiratory failure of COVID patients. According to the complaints of a survivor, the medical graduate student, 24 years old from Wuhan University, she said she must stay awake and breathe consciously during the intensive care. She said that if she fell asleep, she might die because she had lost her natural breath. That's what it said. That's me just reading it. And they're reporting this. And so we see these things where people are falling over. They're perfectly healthy and something didn't happen. If you weren't thinking to breathe and you forgot to breathe and you didn't realize you weren't breathing because you weren't thinking about it, because who thinks about breathing? What happens? You go down. And people say, oh, well, that doesn't work scientifically. The hell it doesn't. Think of how a car works, okay? Electrical systems. If you put the key in the ignition, right? Car doesn't start. What's happening? One of two things isn't working, probably, right? Either A, it's your battery, which in this case, let's say is your brain, the power source, all right? It's a little different, and the other one's the alternator. The alternator is the nervous system. It's the power distributing coupling. That's your nervous system. So if you don't have that, it doesn't matter if everything else is healthy. You can go down. And that's why when we see some of these younger, healthier people who faint or pass out or just fall over in Wuhan, this is an evidence point. This is a study that is working well to explain why it is that something is not happening the way it should be. And people have given me such grief over sharing this. I mean, look, I don't like that it's true either. I hate it. You think I was sitting there this morning. You guys heard the show. I sounded like I was going to get drunk. Now, I didn't actually go get a scotch, but I thought seriously about it. And I was sad afterwards. I mean, I cried for a minute. I mean, I didn't like weep, but I was wispy, and I was reading these articles this morning, and I was like, how am I going to share this with people? I mean, you don't want to hear this. I mean, what happens? I mean, and really, the questions came out of it. I mean, if you want to read the study, what it basically says, like I was saying, is that the coronavirus gets in through here and here, and since it's close to the brain and it's close access, it can cause problems in there. It can cause problems in the lower nervous system, and it causes all these issues. And the problem is, and this is where it gets really nasty. I could have explained this a little more, perhaps, and I'll do it for you guys here. It happens from the very beginning of the infection. So while you're just coughing and you have, a little bit of fever and a little bit of aches, and you're thinking, oh, is this the flu or whatever? And you're 9 days out, 8 days out from the pneumonia that hits. This thing's working on your brain. It's trying to work its way in. Corona chants rough. She's coming at you hard. She wants to get in your head. And this is what happens. And as that happens, you have all sorts of risks, not just in terms of, what it does to your brain. But let's be honest, if this is breaking the blood-brain barrier now, we have evidence of this. What does it mean? And I shared also the other autopsy article for the same reason. If it's breaking the blood-brain barrier, if it's getting deeper into our system, neurological diseases don't go away. How many of you people know someone with Alzheimer's or, any of those sort of diseases? Or, my wife has chronic Lyme or lupus or MS. Those diseases don't go away. They're syndromes. It keeps working at you. You have chronic illness. And I'm wondering, what is the chronic long-term impact of something that is now, we have some evidence is in the neurological system. We haven't been looking at this. We need to start looking at it. And if the evidence says that this doesn't work in those areas and isn't having that big of an impact, I will go with it. But I would draw attention to where it's said at the end of the study, which I think is so important here. And it runs directly opposite of what we are being told publicly. So they say here at the very end of this, just find the right spot here. Bum, 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 bum. All right, so let's just read the implications, because you can read the science of it. This is what you need to know. If the neuroinvasion of COVID does take a part in the development of the respiratory failure in the patients, the precaution with masks will absolutely be the most effective measures to protect against the possible entry of the virus into the central nervous system. It may also be expected that the symptoms of the patients infected by the fecal, oral, or that should be facial, oral, or conjunctival route will be lighter than those infected intranasally. That's saying that the symptoms of the asymptomatic carriers, if I'm really reading this right, and correct me if it doesn't make sense, we got smart people in here. They're saying that the symptoms of the patients infected by the facial, oral, or conjunctival route will be lighter than those infected intranasally. That means into your nose, into your breathing passages. And Dana will correct me. She has some medical background if I get it wrong. No, so the stuff, I'm saying that right? Okay, so, no, well, that's fine. All right, so it's going into your lungs, right? And when this goes into your lungs, you get the bad respiratory problems. But if you get the light asymptomatic version, here's your scary thought of the day, is the asymptomatic the version that's the neurological version of COVID? That's what scares me. Do I know the answer to this? No. Do I think this study asks a lot of important questions? Yes. What do I believe based upon an intelligent layperson reading of this? What this article, which was accepted by the Journal of Virology, is suggesting is that this virus is not just trying to get to your heart. It's not just trying to get to your lungs. It's trying to get in wherever it can, but it likes to get in the brain. And here's the danger. We have a lot of people who have been testing. We've reported 4 or 5 different examples, including one today from Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. 2 negative tests, asymptomatic. It's still there. Why is it there? Because we're looking for it in the wrong place. That's the easiest way to not find it. We're looking with the expectation that this is just a virus you go through, and it goes away. We're looking for a lung infection, where maybe we need to be looking for a neurological disorder. That's really hard, and that's not something we've seen before. But there is evidence of this. Chimerical viruses looking for different ways to put things together. That's what I think we might be dealing with. I would love to be proven wrong, but I am not following just some wild instinct about this. I'm following the evidence of what's happening on the ground, peer-reviewed research, all of this, and I'm telling you what I'm seeing. And I welcome you to tell me, if you're reading this differently. I share all my sources with you. It's very public. This is a problem. So let me say, what it says. Here's what you do to treat this, right? Considering the potential neuroinvasion of COVID, and that's SARS-CoV-2 for those reading along, antiviral therapy should be carried out as early as possible to block entry into the central nervous system. Airway inhalation of antiviral agents will be the first choice at the early stage of infection, which will inhibit the replication of SARS-CoV-2, that's COVID, in the respiratory tracts and lung, and prevent it from subsequent neuroinvasion. It is also urgent to find effective antiviral drugs that can cross the blood-brain barrier. Trust us from people who know chronic Lyme, that isn't happening soon. Moreover, corticosteroids, which are used frequently for severe patients, may have no treatment effect, but may rather accelerate the replication of virus within the neurons. Since COVID may conceal itself in the neurons from the immune recognition, complete clearance of the virus may not be guaranteed even to patients who recover from acute infection. In support of this, there is evidence, and this is a growing body of evidence, that COVID is still detectable in some patients during the convalescence period. Does it go away? What is it doing? No damn clue. Therefore, given the probable neuroinvasion, the risk of COVID infection may be currently underestimated. Maybe the people who we think are asymptomatic are just waiting. We've thought of them as passive carriers who get a little bit sick and get better. I hope that's true. But what if it isn't? These are the questions we should be asking. This is what the CDC should be asking. This is what the World Health Organization should be asking. Instead, they're asking, how can we shut down people who disagree with us? How can we shut down Coronavirus Central? And look, do I know the answers to these questions? No. But I know how to ask a good question. I was a pretty good town manager back in the day. I know how to read a report and cut through the crap and tell you what it's really saying and extract the key points from this. This is what I'm reading. This is what I'm seeing. So you guys tell me. I mean, you tell me if you think it makes sense. I don't know. So, I don't know. I'm frustrated. Let me get a drink of tea. Let me say hi to some people. We'll do this like a proper host should. Because I've done a lot of hosts today, and I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about for tomorrow, honestly. I'm going to talk about Europe, but there's no point in me doing anything until I get up early in the morning. Expect the show to run slightly late tomorrow because I'm going to try to get research in real time. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at some more modeling and see what's going on the field. I'm going to go away from science tomorrow just because there's a lot for people to process, and we're going to talk more about expectations about probably collateral damage, secondary unrest, and that stuff where I talk more, and it's not speculative, it's just an understanding that now we have a virus, and I'll say it tonight for you guys who are here. We have a virus that's already overwhelming the medical system. I watched earlier tonight, Dana and I both did. We watched the Washington State press conference, and they were talking about all the people got sick in this Kirkland Evergreen nursing home system thing, whatever it is. And 6 people ended up dying from that. And what we found out was that they were already worried in Washington, saying, well, we're going to go ahead and try containment for a little while longer. But we know this ultimately isn't going to work, and we're going to move towards curative action. So they know, they're signaling to you. They know there's a lot of cases. They know there are going to be a lot of cases. And there was, you don't want my references. Use the New York Times, okay? They are estimating, their virologists say there's probably about 1,500 cases in Washington State. I think the number is probably about 3 times that. Believe it or not, those are actually relatively similar estimates, with the only major difference being probably that I assume a higher transmission rate based upon what we've seen in Wuhan, what we've seen in South Korea, now reconfirmed, Italy, Iran, and other places. But a large number of cases in any case. And what they're going to do is they know they're going to be overrun in the ICU units. We're going to talk about Milan probably tomorrow again. We're going to talk about Lombardy because the research I'm reading either says the ICUs are starting to be overrun. From Hubei, the problem they ran into was that when the medical system ended up being overrun, they couldn't give the oxygen treatment to these people. And let's put it in the context of the study we talked about. What ended up happening was, as they said in that study, they'd had to put 80 to 90% of these people who were in severe situations on respirators so that they would be able to survive. I am wondering, in Wuhan and now in Italy, people who don't go to the doctor who get this, who have severe conditions, are they quote unquote dying in their sleep from viral pneumonia? Or are they dying because they have a neurological tic that is basically interfering with the normal function of their body? And I'll tell you, as someone who's been exposed to someone who has an immune disorder, things that happen to your immune system are funny, and would you mind me using your example a little bit? So Dana has seizures, right? But they're not normal seizures. They're not epileptic seizures. Her body basically gets confused sometimes. This is something some chronic Lyme's have. And she will have a seizure where we call it the blue screen of death. She goes down for a little while. She'll keep awareness, interestingly enough, but her body will basically short circuit, like it's rebooting itself, for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. This doesn't happen all the time, maybe once a week. It's why I have to stay home and be a full-time caregiver. It gives me a unique bedside perspective on how this mechanism might actually work. And I'm not saying it's the same, but if you know the history of Lyme disease, Lab 257, whatever, you'll recognize that there's certain similarities that are potentially relevant. But I'm just using it as an example to demonstrate the idea that I'm wondering if what's happening with this is that the people are having neurological sickness such that they are now, unable. They go to sleep and they don't wake up. And what a wonderful way to die, really, because if you're going to have people die and you don't want to have a mass public reaction, pretend this was a bioweapon. Let's just assume the opposite of what we're told to assume. What would you want in a bioweapon? Well, you would want it, if you wanted to get the most people possible for whatever reason, you would want something that didn't draw a lot of attention. So let's review what we know about COVID. Children have an unusually, remarkably high survival rate with this. Most diseases overwhelmingly infect two groups of people, the very old and the very young. This thing loves to take out the very old, spares the very young. If kids were dying, if the 6 victims that had died in Washington were children, let me tell you, every mother in America would be taking their kids out of school, and you would have the end of the spread of this disease. But instead, we have something else. People out there who say this is a hoax, where are the videos? Well, people are locked in their apartments and they're dying at home. Oh, it's pneumonia. It's some other cause. They had the flu. We don't know. If you wanted to allay public suspicion, and this is a circumstantial case, but we're just thinking out loud, you would have a situation where you would literally want people to go ahead and die in the quietest way possible. And to be honest, the other thing about not having death videos, imagine your mother died, your father died. In fact, I experienced this. Both my parents are dead. The last thing you're thinking or want to do in that situation, if you care about those people, is sensationalize it. So why don't you see the videos? Because you wouldn't do that. It would be almost too obvious, like those ISIS videos we used to see that, looked like they were filmed in front of a green screen. Instead, they would look like the Iran video I shared, and you can look it up on Coronavirus Cast. I'm not going to move because every time I do, this goes down, and we don't want that to happen because we're having finally a functional and good stream. And like I said, thank you to everyone who made it over here, the people who are listening, podcast listeners, friends, everyone alike. And we're just working through now a scenario of what if this was a bioweapon, what you would want it to do. You would want it to have multiple means of entry, and you'd want it to be able to survive in different environments. I saw someone asking, does this work better in hot environments, cold environments? Well, it seems pretty versatile. It's working in urban areas. It's working in rural areas. It likes clusters. It's spreading quickly. And, when we were working on the numbers, we talked about this today, America has a lot of problems. It has a very low number of ICU beds compared to the surge capacity that's needed, right? It has a very high percentage of the population that's obese. It's about 35%. So 1 in 3 Americans will say that you have a lot of people with diabetes. It's up over 10%. You have the highest number of cancer patients in the world. That's about 5%. And there's a lot of overlaps with these things. And you have about 15% of the population that's over the age of 65. So you take all of these sort of groups, and I can't tell you what the exact number of them is, but let's say it's 100 million people. Just pick a number, because I can use bigger or smaller. Those are people who are going to be at risk. They're going to get this. The system's not going to work. I talked to a couple doctors today. A doctor was telling me, if this gets bad, he can't go to work because he doesn't have protection for himself. The healthcare system is following the advice of the CDC. The CDC is saying, well, you don't really need masks and you don't need to worry about it. He's reading this study. He's a professional. He's like, yeah, these people are going to get me killed. And I don't blame him for not showing up. We want our doctors, our nurses, our medical professionals to show up. But when they are being literally led toward prospective death, like Dr. Lee was in China, how are we supposed to ask that of them? And we said on the podcast 2 damn weeks ago, the most basic thing, preserve protection for your medical personnel, have them overreact rather than underreact. But the government continues to go ahead and think this is a small little thing that they're going to overcome. They think, I'll tell you what I think they really think, and I don't know this either, but I think they got this. They're going to have the 2 to 5% die-off rate. It's going to be tragic. We're going to go on, and they're going to get past it. That's what they think, and they think somehow they're going to go ahead and control this in some way. They're not. We're looking at the Wuhan scenario where they're not covering our noses. We're not covering our faces. Everyone's running around in public. They're going to elections. They're going to campaign rallies, to concerts, to all these things. People are getting sick. They think they're asymptomatic. The ones who are getting sick and dying early, who knows? They may end up being the lucky ones. We don't know what this is going to do to people's minds and to brains. And we don't know because China's not telling us. And let me tell you, I make no apologies for the People's Republic of China. The information they are sharing has been so scant, so useless in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying the researchers, to be very clear, but that their government is putting out, rah-rah signals that could be absolutely fatal to the people throughout the Western world and much of the Eastern world. And if you think that's an accident, you don't understand geopolitics. The time has come for us to get past this. And look, let me say, I got a lot of people in here. A lot of you guys in here I know are pretty far right guys. A lot of you people in here are also far left people. And a lot of you people are apolitical. You're all welcome. Every one of you. That's what we're doing in the show. And I tell you, if I can have a moment just to vent as your friendly show host, I go on the reviews and there's like 2 or 3 people who just keep pummeling me with different reviews saying, oh, this guy said this and this guy said that. Yeah, I have opinions. I'm an American. I'm entitled to those. You don't have to agree with them. It doesn't matter in the context of what we're dealing with. It shouldn't matter. And there are so many people caught in this mindset, this construct, which is so not helpful to dealing with the issue before us, which is coronavirus. It's not about the economy. It's not about foreign policy. It's not about ideology. It's not about the election. It's about saving lives, keeping people safe. Because at the end of the day, if we end up having 10, 20, 30% of our population die and some other percent of our population with chronic neurological symptoms, what kind of country are we going to have? I'll tell you what, we won't have any country. I'm going to survive up here in Maine a lot longer than most people. I'm prepared for that. I expect the worst, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow, why I think that's going to happen. I'm going to give you some research about the ICU situation and what's going to happen. I said in the strongest terms on the Saturday show, to get food in place, get resources in place. What are they doing? Not that. I hope they're doing more than I think. And I hope they're, look, if you guys don't know what to do, call me up, okay? Make me your coronavirus czar. Would you guys support that, me going in there? I tell you what, it wouldn't be a democracy, but we'd save a lot of lives, and that's what we need to do now. We need, the problem is now we're going to have FEMA jump in. That's going to get complicated. It's going to be a mess. And I understand the politics of it. I understand the lack of trust. I don't trust the government. I don't like the government. The government doesn't like me. Every time I try to go into Canada, I get to sit there for 3 hours and tell my life story. Sucks a dick. But this is beyond that. This is so much bigger than that. And that's what I want to say. We need to get beyond those things. And we need to talk about the virus. We need to talk about the consequences. But unfortunately, the government's very inefficacy in dealing with this, anticipating the supply chain issues, working to get goods to where they need to go, is making it where these political issues are going to matter, because the politics of the future is very simple. Who is healthy? Who is not? Who can you verify has this and who can you not? Because until we know that people who've had this are not active carriers that are going to infect you through some means, whether it be, with a lot of neurological disease. And if Dana wants to jump in, I'll let her here because she knows more than I do about this. You see infections happen through sexual transmission, through fluid transfer, through blood transfer. So if we have, let's say 70% of Americans, which is what the British epidemiologists suspected would happen worldwide, get sick, and they're going ahead and they're hugging, loving, kissing, whatever, they're in the blood supply. They're sharing this thing. Like, oh, well, we got antibodies. They're cured. They're healed. And this is sitting there in the background. You can passively transfer it. Like Lyme transfers in utero, transfers all these different ways. And I'm really worried about that. And I will tell you, the way I'm starting to think of politics is not just in terms of survivors and griefers, but the healthy people need to quarantine ourselves from the people who are not healthy. We need reliable tests. I reported on the serological test coming out of Singapore. We can look for the antibodies and see who's had this and who hasn't. We now have a way to have a record of this. It's pretty reliable. They've separated out COVID from SARS. Once we get that there, and I'll tell you, if I was in charge of Piscataquis County Health Department, people would be mad as hell at me. I'd shut off the whole damn county. I wish I was still a town manager. You know what? I would close off Jackman. It would have been great. And everyone would have been mad at me. I'd be like, give it a couple weeks. Because 2 weeks from now, I won't look crazy. Because the same thing that happened 2 weeks ago, a lot of people who knew me, including people in this chat, they'll attest, thought, why has Tom gone off his rocker talking about these things? But I haven't. I'm just looking at the math, the statistics, and trying to protect the people who are healthy. If you are one of those people, this is the time to make decisive decisions. This is a natural selection, choose your adventure kind of moment. Do you decide to protect your economic well-being, assuming that things will go well? Or do you decide to deal with the consequences of protecting yourself to a higher standard, not knowing what will happen? And I will tell you, if you're worried about the financial end of it, the government's probably going to bail you out eventually if money has meaning at all. We've seen it in Hong Kong. We've seen it in other places. And if we push hard enough, the bailouts won't just go to the big banks who have all the damn money anyway. Maybe some of them will go to the people. But these are the sort of questions and problems that are going to make up public policy, not now, probably in April. It's heavy. It's deep. That's how I look at it. If you agree, disagree, tell me in the comments section. We'll look. I'm going to go through your things here that are there. And thank you for everyone. I'm glad this is keeping here. I'm glad that you're here. You have a chance to see me, hear me. This is me. This is what I really look like. This is what I do in the morning. I come in there. I literally go in the other room there. And if it sounds tinny, I apologize. We're going to have a Kickstarter if they'll let me put one up at the end of the month, or not the end of the month. It should be scheduled to launch if there's no interruptions on March 13th. If you guys can help it happen, man, kick up $5. There's 3 tiers, $5, $20, and $60. I'm going to get more people on board with this. The best research is happening in China. That's most relevant. The American research complex is so far behind us, and it makes sense. There's not the case studies. It's not all bureaucratic, but we need to get that research translated into English and get eyes on it fast. And we need to go ahead and not wait for everything to be peer reviewed 100 times. We need to go ahead and figure out how do we make ourselves safe until we know what's happening, and then be unafraid to go from a position of maximum security to go ahead and adjust what we are doing to, as we know there are things we can do safely, we open things back up. When there's a bad storm, you don't, in the middle of the hurricane, you don't go out there and be like, well, it's only a category 3, not a category 5, and then you get decapitated by a road sign. I drove in New York during Hurricane Sandy. I know what I'm talking about. You don't do that. And in the same way, we don't want to do this with COVID. We keep looking past the virus. Even the people who want to survive this are looking past it. What I'm telling you, that you are in a fight for your life now with an enemy who has weapons you don't know about, and that you can't let this go. And just because he, it's like if he stabs you and it's a blade that has poison on it and you die a month later or 3 months later or something like that, it's just as bad. And we don't know what weapons you have. We don't know what this is. And what we have are people, how should I say, enforcing normalcy bias, saying, well, it has to be this because everything else has been like this. We don't know what it is. I wish we did. Okay, so let's go back to reading through this here. People falling face first. Whiskey will make for a good bartering item. Absolutely. In a pinch, it's a Molotov cocktail. If you don't know what that is, start doing some research. The world is coming to you. You like that one? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Real info is good. The other channels are selling freeze-dried water, man. Absolutely. Hey, someone should sponsor me, by the way. I would totally be sponsored. You guys show me a good product, man. I'm prepared to do that. But I'll tell you what I would sponsor. If you have time, if you haven't done it, for God's sakes, please do it. Get yourself at least 30 days of food. If you can get yourself more days, 90 days, I'm going to, probably restock 2 in the next day or 2. Up here in Maine, the chances are probably minimal. If there are things happening, by the way, this is just based on personal intel. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm not going to tell you my sources. Brunswick and Waterville, keep an eye on those 2 towns. If you're going to see something based on the chatter I'm hearing. And the thing about anecdotal evidence, this is actually something interesting I want to share with you. Where there's smoke, there's a lot of times fire. It's not always that people know what's happening, but people tend to know where something's happening. And if you can kind of use that as a focus and then narrowly dive down. We said on the show that we thought Seattle was going to be a problem area. Lo and behold, over 10 cases. We said that Toronto was going to be a problem area going back to last week. Certain habits made that seem likely. Lo and behold, there it is. Everyone knew San Francisco was going to be a problem area because, there's just certain ways that things are conducted in that town that are really problematic for public health, and also the population overlap. So what are we going to see this week? I think you're going to see it. I'm going to predict that it probably happens in Seattle before San Francisco. If a quarantine's happening, it's going to happen up there. And that will be an interesting tell for what the public response is. Now, one of the things that will decrease problems, and we just have to talk about this because it's really important, is that the quarantines that are going to be attempted are probably going to happen in overwhelmingly blue areas. And I say this because if you came to a red area with FEMA camps, that's the sign that the apocalypse is nigh, and you're going to have people lined up on the ridge to reenact, the Battle of Gettysburg. And the people on the ridge will be the Confederates this time. So it's and I hate to make it about that, but I just know how people think, and we have to be realistic about the expectations people have. So it's good that this is being tried in those areas, and hopefully something positive will come of it. In Wuhan, it does appear that they, to some extent, were able to reduce the number of cases. However, they also reduced a lot of bodies, and one of the things that we saw come out, it was in late January, was the requirement that they burn the bodies, and there must have been something transmitting from those bodies they chose to do this with. And that wasn't uncommon. Europe did the same in the Black Plague. We've seen this in many cases. But when we start having the problems of a lot of people dying, and in America with our social media, it will be impossible to hide. Although they may cut it off. Imagine a world without Twitter or YouTube or any of that. In which case, I'm going to use my pirate ham radio here, and you'll find me somewhere. I don't know what my call sign will be, but I'll find someone out there who can do it, and I'll learn how to do this because I prepared ahead a little bit. That's what I should be doing, but instead I'm helping people because I realized a strange contradiction with this whole thing. If more people help themselves, a lot more people can help one another. And we can't save everyone. And I know that's a hard thing to say to people. We all have loved ones that are acting this way, but those loved ones may become a risk to you. And, I'm not saying that we don't want to take care of them, but we're going to need some means of separation to prevent the healthy from getting the sick, further sick, until we can prove that the risk can be minimized and what the vectors for transmission are and what the long-term cost is. And I don't mean forever, but maybe 3 months, 6 months, something reasonable. And, we have some automation. If we have to send little drones back and forth between, the colony of COVID free and COVID possessing, maybe that's what we have to do if it comes to that. And I know this sounds way down the line, but this is where you need to be. You need to be 3, 4, 5, 10 steps ahead if you can get there, thinking about the consequences of what's going to happen. What's going to happen when we have 10 to 30% of the population who all need medical care and can't get it? There's going to be a lot of death. What is that going to mean for our society's function? At the same time, we're having supply chain disruptions out of China. We've all talked about that. It means that confidence in government will fail. Trust will go down. What's it going to mean if we find more research, we're already finding, that suggests that people can really contaminate one another in meaningful ways? It means that everyone is going to be suspicious. And unless you know someone's safe and you have some structure set up locally, and by locally, I mean start with yourself, build into your family, your neighbors, your direct people who enjoy conjoined direct local space, people who are in your circle, in your vicinity, who you can verify their habits don't put them as a risk factor. You need to be making friends with them. That's why the most important thing I did was get an article in the local paper, the Moosehead Matters, readership you. That's what I put it in there because I wanted people in town to understand and to be prepared for these things because they needed to be. And even here, they're not. I mean, there are people who are really prepared and a bunch of people weren't. And I live in a town where the majority of people are over the age of 65. It's going to be a problem. It's going to be a big problem. But this is the reality of it, and we need to be prepared for these things. So let's see what you guys are writing here. Flu breaks the blood-brain barrier too. It can. Throttle Grim. Is it true the virus doesn't like the heat or sun? Generally, how should I put it? Biological material is easier to disinfect at high temperatures, but it will survive for a little while. Let's see. Importing to Mega. Excellent study. Flu. Blah, blah. So are they? Bob Dole asks, coming live from Kansas, right? So are they talking about Relenza, Zamavir, rotahators then? Those things cost an arm and a leg. We only allowed them from pregnant women during the swine flu because the government could stock so few. I am sure they're looking at all the antivirals that are designed for HIV. And, we said this on the show, but for people who didn't listen to those episodes, basically what a lot of antivirals do is they create decoys, if you think of it that way. They create things that look like what viruses would want to bond to, and therefore they prevent the spread by giving a boost to the immune system by reducing the load it has to deal with. And it can be very expensive to do this because there's a lot of sculpting in that, yet we're going to have to deal with it. The good news, no, listen, I don't want to say it that way. The reality is that there will probably be fewer people to reduce the demand as the supply line comes up, and we'll want to make sure that happens. I don't know the difficulties of the chemical production. I would be very interested. In fact, this is what I'm going to put in my notes. Do I have a notepad somewhere here? I'm going to tell you what I'm going to talk about for tomorrow. Do I have a pen? I have pens down here. We'll put it on here. Give me 1 second. I couldn't ask the question, and this is a question we should be asking. See, you guys make me think of important things, which is how, and of course the friggin' pen doesn't work, right? Because there's a thing on it. Nothing works around here anymore. Welcome to 2020, where we can see clearly just how screwed we are. Man, and I'm not even drinking yet. If I did a show Saturday night where I got blitzed one night, would you guys want to watch that? You hear things you would, that'll be the end of the Coronavirus Central, but it'd be very entertaining for about an hour and a half. How quickly can we build chemical production? Should I say firm? Should do RX. That'll be faster. Capacity to See, you guys teach me. This is how the whole process works. You're seeing in real time what we do in the Telegram chat, and it's very busy, and there's a lot of how should I say, noise to signal ratio, but we find things and we pull out conversations and people find one another, and there's a lot of usefulness. That's how open source works. It's like going sifting through 4chan. You know how it goes. It's a whole bunch of useless posts to find one gem and one person who actually sees something, which, by the way, thank you for that, for all our friends at Poll and GLP and all the backwater dives of the internet that, actually have been ahead of this. Yeah. It's funny. I worked for Ron Paul in 2008. I literally worked for Doom Paul. So I'm like a disciple of the prophet. It's so funny. It's like literally living in the meme universe. It's so crazy. How quickly can we build chemical or pharmaceutical to create antivirals? And I'm going to try to have an answer for you. Don't expect me to have it tomorrow. If I do, I'll share it. But I'm going to ask around. And I know a really smart guy who can help with that. And he's helped. We put out the list of the drugs actually that were going to run low. Let me read that too real fast because I think it's that important. And I was proud of it. We do original research around here, which is basically we kind of have people who go around past what you're supposed to know, and we tell you what you need to know before the public knows. And that's the advantage of being part of our network. We take care of you. It doesn't cost you anything but time and the willingness to be open-minded. So these are the partial list of antibiotics. Dana will correct my mispronunciations. There will be many, I am sure. Ceftazidime, cefazolin, cefepime, cefoxidin, capromycin, imipenem, piperacillin. And then the other drugs are atropine, bumetanide, what would it be? Bumetanide, we think calcium chloride. I think it'd be ide. Bumetanide. Yeah, I look, I don't know how to speak druggy. So I'm sorry, but that's it. Druggies don't know how to speak druggy either. Have you met them? They know how to speak Cheetos. Dexamethasone. And I crack jokes not because this isn't serious, but because you're gonna laugh or you're gonna cry. Let's laugh a little bit. Acerbic humor. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posy. That was kids' way of dealing with the fact that everyone around them was falling down. They tried to make it approachable. We're human. We have emotions. We're gonna have to deal with them. When even a robot like me starts getting wispy, things are going off the tracks. Dilitazam, diphenhydramine, dopamine, dobutamine, and enalapril, epinephrine. And I'm going to share this as a picture in the chat if I can. Eprosartan, fluvoxamine, heparin, hydromorphone, ketamine, ketorolac, labetalol, levetiracetam, lidocaine, pantozapro, remifentanil, ropivacaine, sodium bicarbonate, hot salt, tacrolimus, valsartan, and vinblastine. So how was that? Dana will judge my failure to do it. Was it okay? Do I get a B plus?
Yeah.
She gave me a C. My German wife is so tough, man. Tell you what. Anyway, so those are some of the things here. And give me a thumb. Yeah, give me a thumbs up. Absolutely, there's 53 of you. Takes a second. That makes a difference. I mean, I'm not making any money doing this. I at least should get some moral satisfaction, right? I mean, you guys are so funny because on the one hand, if I don't show up, you should see my thing. Why aren't you out here on Sunday? Why aren't you here? I mean, if someone wants to help me, if we have some people here, there's some people who are really good. I'd love to put together a Sunday show that I don't do. There we cover some different things, maybe some stories. I thought I had someone who would help, but then they decided this was a hoax and went a little nutty. So unfortunately, that's how that goes. All right. Could this be U.S. made? Let's see. Jared Schuster asked. Yeah, it could be. Absolutely, it could be U.S. made. And I tell you what, if you guys, if for those who are more tinfoil hat minded, since this is an unscripted show, I would love to have some people look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, look at the responsible people there because they have been the single biggest donor to China. They were the biggest donor for a lot of this research going back in time. They have a very long record of being involved with vaccines and in studying biological studies. They also were heavily involved with the creation of the seed vault in Kalbard. If you don't know, there's this place off an island in Norway, in the middle of nowhere. They put seeds of like everything designed if the world ended, basically. And it's out there. So I'm not saying, and these things exist. You can look them up. They're public record. So I have wondered what their role in all of this. And they're also the single biggest private donor to the World Health Organization, who I would note, the biggest state donor is China, the biggest donor in terms of private donors, and they're pretty close to China. It's like $280 million a year. It's a huge number. So every time you turn into Microsoft Windows, the windows are looking back at you, looking with big pharma with eyes. And isn't that funny too? Like this is another piece. People ask about 5G and all that, and people talk about that besides me. But one thing that I've been wondering about is this connection between big pharma and big tech. Like the fact that the guy who owns Google, his wife is heavily involved with 23andMe, and that you always see they're trying to hack the code. I learned about something today I had never heard about. Dana, had you heard about XNA either? This was crazy. There is something called XNA, which sounds absolutely nutty, right? But I will share this with you because I saw something, just a throwaway thing. It was a post on 4chan, but this just like blew my friggin' mind that this is a thing. They have basically designed the ability to create synthetic DNA and RNA where it can teach other things, and we don't know what it's saying. So when we have these virologists and these people go out there and say, hey, this is behaving this way, we don't know what we're dealing with. We are living in a world where there are things so far beyond our understanding, and I hope that our states, which do a lot of this crazy research, have some understanding of what this is. You know, is this an escape? Is it bioterrorism? Is it freak mutation? I don't know. I don't think it's a freak mutation. Mutation is slow and gradual, or if it has something happen, it tends to change one thing, not everything towards all, you know. It's not you win the Powerball of virology every day. So I don't know. We'll see. But could it have been made in the U.S.? I think it's absolutely possible. I know the Chinese might believe the CIA did it, and you know there are people in the CIA who believe the Chinese did it to themselves. And who do you want to blame? I don't know. I don't know who it could be. The interesting thing about bioterrorism, let's assume this was an intentional act, is we'll never know who did it, and it will be hard to find the footprints. I mean, all right, so we're living in the 12 Monkeys timeline, right? So people going back and watching this, let me share this with you. I'll do my best Bruce Willis impression so I can help you because we're doing research as this actually happened. Go back, look at Wuhan. Look what happened there in October and November. There's a lot of evidence that suggests weird things were happening there. Do I know and can I connect it? That's beyond the scope of what I can know. But should you ask that question? Yes. Look at that. Look at the Gates Foundation. Look at Event 201. Look at the military exercises where all the militaries of the world were gathered there at a conference in October. Why were they in Wuhan? Why does this happen? People in the virology world were saying things were floating around the fringes for a while. And maybe this gets released into the wild and gets, how should I say, I mean, it's almost like laundering bioterrorism in the same way, like in the drug industry or drugs, right? What happens is they launder the money through the casinos and the drug trade if you want to get money out there. Could that be happening with bioterrorism? Absolutely. Do I know that? No. And look, I don't do these speculations on the air because people don't want to hear that. They want to hear how to survive, how to go through things. But you bet your backside. I'm wondering where the motives are. I'm trying not to curse because in the real life, in the real world, I'm kind of a rough dude. It's just the way it is. I kind of look this way for a reason. You know, I cultivate that persona. Doesn't mean I don't like to think, but we're all going to have to be a little bit of gruff in the future. You know, we're heading back to the 1880s. Be ready for it. Go watch Back to the Future 3, have some laughs, and say, damn, I wish I would have gone into the timeline where Biff owned the casino. Oh, wait. Anyway, what do we got here? Could this be U.S. made? Does the poor air quality in China mean higher levels of vitamin D deficiency? You would think so, considering the role it plays. My thoughts on a motive for the U.S. are crippling the Chinese economy. That's true, but you know the problem about this is it's literally, this is like a game where, have you ever played Civilization? Okay, if you play Civilization or a lot of different games, there you get a start point and you start a map and you work your way through resolving the map, right? And you see these things, you're like, no, I don't want this. Or you see this happen in other things, right? You take a class on something you think is going to be interesting. I took a class on Mandarin once, actually, when I was in my mid-20s. And I was like, I want to learn this. This will be great. This will be fascinating. I can't hear tones. I can't speak in tones either. But I was like, this doesn't work. So you restart the map. You restart the class. You pick something different. And in that term, COVID is a reset for the world in a lot of ways, and it's going to reset us to a more natural state for whomever the survivors are, assuming there are any. And, you know, there will be some probably. I mean, whether it's herd immunity, whether it's people who, you know, dish out their daily dose of vaccine. And I'll say another thing. I had a phone call from a smart person today saying, why do you talk about vaccine? Is it going to happen? And the answer is not soon and maybe not ever. And I say that because it's going to take them 12 to 18 months to get this rolled out, assuming they have the productive capacity. But they haven't been able to do things for beta coronaviruses in the past. They didn't get one from MERS. They didn't get one from SARS. they probably won't get it for this. And they say, I'm the snake oil salesman. Your, forsythia is the promise of a vaccine. It probably isn't going to happen. The best they can manage in reality and where the money's going, the spending, is a combination of antivirals that restrain this and antibodies that give you some support if you don't get this neurologically, which we are now learning some percentage of the people have. And the only way that I know with Lyme, they were able to really tell, they have something called the Western blot test that they use. It's like 10% effective. There are more expensive ones. They're like 30, 40%. And the problem with all these PCR tests is that they're looking for genetic markers of diseases that know how to hide. What they find, interestingly, with some of those diseases is they only find it in autopsies in brain tissue. And why would you find it that way? It's in the neurological system. And for a virus, our neurological system is great because you're away from the attacking entities, right? Antibodies don't exist in the brain because if they did, they would go ahead and do what they do in the blood, which is they would destroy infected tissue. If your body, your antibodies start attacking the brain and killing nerve tissue, you would end up with a terrible situation. Like if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to think, what would that be? That's like a brain tumor. What would happen if antibodies? I'm asking Dana to help here. If antibodies got into the neurological system and started, actively attacking threats in there, what would it do to the nervous system? It would just destroy it, wouldn't it? Because it would destroy the axial sheath. And all right, so the way your nervous system basically works is it shoots light speed signals along what's called the axon. It's a highly rich protein layer. Think like a battery. If you don't know how a battery works, it's basically you have a whole bunch of charge here and a whole bunch of charge not here because you're having protons and electrons moving along a gradient, right? It's that. Brains work the same way as a battery, if you really get technical about it. That you have, they change I think it's sodium and chloride, and that's why salt's so important, but you can correct me. Isn't that how it works? So it changes, it uses the polarity of the two things to create basically an atomic pole, like a magnet, if you want to think of it that way. I'm oversimplifying. That pulls the charge down, but that's dependent on this really rich, highly lubricated sheath, okay? And so when you get into these things, what it does is it messes with the sheath. And in the same way that if you dumped water through Swiss cheese, you'd end up with a mess underneath. That's what happens when things get into your neurological system. These are some of the things that we should be afraid of. And that I'm wondering as time goes by, depending upon what this does, I can only pray that it's a passive actor that sits in the neurological system rather than something that actually actively attacks it due to some factor that we can't determine, be it natural or artificial. This is where we are speculating in the group. If you're not in the group, Telegram is you can use it on your phone, different things. It's good for private messaging. Let's put it that way. T.me/coronavirus central. And they're a lot less likely to cancel us than Twitter, Facebook, or even my web hosting because I'm probably costing them a lot of bandwidth and I'm getting good value for $25. I don't know that they are, and I suspect they're going to send me something soon asking for more bank. Nonetheless, we will continue. So let's see what we got here. We have a lot more questions here. And let's see, thoughts on motives. Thanks for putting politics aside. We're going to need it. Yeah, absolutely. Look, we need people who can bring different things to the table. And look, there's a lot of people, just in the interest of full integrity, who I've been fighting a very, very long time that I would love to be awake. Because at this point, the only two parties are the people who are awake and the people who are asleep. And whatever differences we have to get past, look, the human race is now under a common threat. It's a little bastard that's going out and trying to kill us all. I will fight with you alongside that. Whatever we disagree about, if you are smart enough to have figured this out, you've earned your way to this keep. And if you're dumb enough that you haven't, I can't save you. I've tried. I mean, seriously, you guys listen to the show. Could I do more than I'm doing? I mean, I've been out there and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it, but it's my duty as a Christian. I do it. And okay. What do we got here? And thank you for that, Urielis. Urielis, did I pronounce that right? My pronunciation of certain things is terrible. I actually speak Spanish, although I don't like to use it too much. I'm using it now, which I never thought would happen. Je parle un peu de français, and io parlo un po' l'italiano, Before I was a jerk, I was actually a smart guy. I'm back to being a smart guy. It's weird how the redemption path works, but it's good for you guys, actually. I'll say this. I was just a personal aside. I was telling Dana earlier, I was like, I spent the last 2 years being persecuted and living in political oblivion because I said that nature exists, basically. And it's fine if you disagree with some of my conclusions, but I learned how to tell the truth under persecution. I learned how to do a lot of things on my own, which even this whole broadcast, I set it up, I record it, I do everything. If some parts of it suck, that's because you have a one-man band rolling up here. And although I'd love to have someone in here to help and support, you know, you might be contaminated. Sorry. So unless the wife wants to learn something, and that's probably not going to happen. Although she does do a lot of research, she does a lot of promotion, and everyone gives some love and some thanks to Dana. But I've learned how to work my way through the corners of the system, and that's why I can find information better and talk to interesting people. Presumably, some of you are going to have to learn that as well. You're all scroungers, you're all scavengers, you're all survivors now. We're going to learn these skills, and I will teach you some things. And you don't have to adapt everything. Adapt everything to what works for you and your situation. That's what I expect from you. That's what I want. It's not, slave